Are your debts so overwhelming that life is starting to feel really bleak? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about bankruptcy. I'll explain what it is, discuss the two different types of bankruptcy, and give you some factors to consider when weighing its consequences, both the negative and the positive. By the end, you'll leave with a better understanding of whether and how a bankruptcy might fit into your financial future, and if it does, ways you can rise above the stigma and actually harness it to improve your financial life. If that sounds good to you, let's get going. Welcome to Refactor Your Money. I'm Max, an accredited financial counselor, here to help you break free from financial stress and start living a life of purpose. Now, real quick, before we get into what a bankruptcy is, I first want to talk about the three different ways to eliminate debt. Way number one is the obvious one, which is repayment. That's when you pay back the amount you borrowed and the loan is cleared. The second way is forgiveness. This is where a creditor forgives the balance of a loan, essentially resetting it back to zero and freeing the debtor from any future payments. And the third one is discharge. This is where a third party, usually a court, steps in and releases the debtor from any future obligation to repay a creditor. And when we're talking about bankruptcy, we're talking about number three. It's the most common tool used to discharge a debt. Now, getting into the nuances of what a bankruptcy is. First, I want to talk about what it is, then I'm going to talk about what it's not. Now, at its core, a bankruptcy is a court order that releases a debtor from a personal liability or obligation to repay certain types of debt. It's also a constitutionally guaranteed right that permits people and businesses to ask a court to find them unable to repay their debts. During a bankruptcy, a debtor is no longer obligated to repay the debts that are discharged by the court. It also represents a fresh start in a lot of cases, essentially allowing the debtor to start over, albeit with a few disadvantages. Now, one nuance to know about bankruptcy is that there are some debts that are never discharged as a part of bankruptcy. These include education loans that have come due within the last 7 years, fines, alimony, child support, income taxes for the 3 most recent years, or debts for causing an injury due to operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol. And lastly, bankruptcy is a last resort. It really is only something that should be considered when the first two means of clearing a debt are unachievable, right? That's repayment and forgiveness. Now, when we hear the word bankruptcy, often it's a big, scary word. We all know it carries a stigma, and there's good reasons for that. There are some negative adverse consequences of filing for bankruptcy. It can bring up a lot of negative feelings where maybe you feel like you are a failure for not having managed your money well enough. You're sort of putting out there to the world, right? That like, I don't know how to do this. I've screwed up. And it's really just sort of, it can feel like a public declaration of failure, right? But it's also important to remember a couple of things bankruptcy is not. One thing it's not is the end of the world. According to uscourts.gov, there were 517,308 bankruptcy filings in the year 2024. So if you're considering bankruptcy, you're not alone. It's also important to remember that there is life after bankruptcy. In fact, the entire purpose of bankruptcy is to take enough pressure off the debtor to allow them to get back on track. The key for the debtor going through a bankruptcy is to learn and grow from the experience to help them avoid the same fate the second time around. And if you personally are considering a bankruptcy, keep an eye on my future releases because I do have a video coming soon all about how to recover from a bankruptcy. So now that we know what a bankruptcy is and we know what a bankruptcy isn't, let's get into a little bit about the two different types of bankruptcy. Type 1 is Chapter 13 bankruptcy. This is also sometimes called the wage earner plan or the regular income plan. A Chapter 13 bankruptcy is essentially a scheme that allows income earners to satisfy their debts either in whole or in part within a specified period of time. It's designed for individuals who are earning an income and may actually be able to satisfy some or all of their debts if given enough protections from the court. In Chapter 13 bankruptcy, the debtor submits a repayment proposal plan to the court for evaluation that lays out the ways in which they'll pay back as much of the debts as possible within given restrictions from the court, usually within a period of about 3 to 5 years. When a debtor files a petition for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, the court generally issues an automatic stay, basically a court order that temporarily prevents creditors from collecting on any obligations that originated from before the bankruptcy proceeding began. It also protects the debtor from collection efforts by creditors, including garnishments. And typically no assets may be sold by a debtor or repossessed by a lender after a stay is granted. Then, after the court notifies all creditors of the petition for bankruptcy, a hearing is scheduled. At that point, with the help of a bankruptcy trustee, which is just a fancy word for agent of the court, the repayment plan submitted by the debtor is reviewed, modified if needed, and then ultimately approved. That trustee is then also in charge of distributing funds to the creditors in accordance with the court-approved plan. At that point, the debtor is also expected to follow a strict budget throughout the course of the repayment plan, and they aren't allowed to take on any additional credit without approval from the trustee. If the debtor is able to follow through on all their obligations and payments under the court-approved plan, they're then discharged from any further remaining obligations and all the amounts that they were unable to pay throughout the course of the plan. If the debtor makes all scheduled payments, they're then discharged from all remaining amounts that were unable to be repaid during the court-approved repayment period. Chapter 13 is generally a good option for those who have an income and are able to pay their living expenses, but they're unable to pay their debts. Their debts are so overwhelming that they just can't meet those obligations. It's also a good option for those who want to try to keep their assets like their home or their vehicle, which you'll see more about when we talk about Chapter 7 next. Before we get into Chapter 7, I'd really like to ask you a quick favor. If you're getting value from this video, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. It really helps this small channel grow. And even better, if you'd leave a comment below with a challenge you're facing financially, I would love to hear it. I've got all kinds of videos planned, but they're all based on what I think is great and what I want to talk about. But this channel is about you, and I want to know what you're facing so that I can make videos tailored to be helpful to you. Speaking of that, if this video is resonating with you and you may be considering bankruptcy, I want to offer you a tool that I think could help. Down below, I have a link to my personal financial planning template that I offer to my own clients and I used during my own personal financial turnaround back in 2018. In that financial planning template are a series of ratios you can use to calculate your overall financial health. One of those ratios is the debt payments to disposable income ratio. Now that's a fantastic ratio you can use to calculate whether your debt payments above and beyond your living expenses are becoming too unwieldy and overburdensome for your personal financial life. If you're interested in it and you want to get a look at where you might stand in that ratio, click the link down below, fill out the form, and you'll get instant access to my personal financial tracking template. You can enter in your own information and the ratio will automatically calculate for you. If you want more information about how to use it, you can check out this video here where I talk all about personal financial ratios and how to do a full wellness checkup on your own financial health. Great, now back to the video. The second type of bankruptcy is Chapter 7. It's called the Immediate Liquidation Plan, or otherwise sometimes known as just straight bankruptcy. Now, this may be the type of bankruptcy that comes to mind for you when you think about bankruptcy. It involves the debtor selling all of their assets, all the proceeds from those assets being distributed to creditors, and then any remaining obligations and balances being wiped clean. Now, this option is really only permitted by the court in circumstances where substantial repayment on the existing debt is highly unlikely to occur. Now, the court enforces this by having petitioners for Chapter 7 go through what's called a means test. Now, this is there to help the courts determine whether the petition for Chapter 7 bankruptcy is in fact actually an abuse of bankruptcy laws and needs to be dismissed. So when a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is allowed by the court, generally the assets for the petitioner are going to be given over to the trustee. And the trustee, if any of those assets are used as collateral for a loan, is generally going to turn those assets over to the creditor that had that asset used as collateral. So for example, a house or a vehicle, right? Assets that generally are used as collateral. So if the loan goes into default, the creditor has the right to repossess. Anything that is unsecured will generally be sold, and then the proceeds from those sales will go to creditors. So if you as the petitioner decide you want to reaffirm a debt, which basically means to reclaim it as it in its original state and continue to pay on it as you normally would, that generally has to happen before the discharge occurs. This is generally done through a written reaffirmation agreement that is signed by the petitioner and turned over to the court. And this is most often done for things like vehicles, for example, where the petitioner is going to need to keep their car in order to get to and from work, for example. There are some state and federal laws that govern which types of assets the debtor can keep in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Again, those could vary by state, but some examples might include a vehicle, a small amount of equity in a house, or maybe some limited personal property. You may have gathered already, but Chapter 7 bankruptcy is generally best for either those who don't have very many assets or those who have very little income and thus have a very unlikely chance of being able to dig themselves out of the debt hole that they find themselves in. Debtors going through a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, having all their debts discharged, generally do emerge from that bankruptcy with a vastly improved net worth, which, just as a quick reminder, is assets minus liabilities. If you need a refresher on net worth, I've got a video all about it over here. You can click that and watch that. But remember that despite having a much improved net worth, generally this also leads to a vastly decreased credit score. So your credit score is going to take a big hit. Bankruptcy will show up on a credit report. So that's actually a good transition into the next topic I want to talk about, which is when to actually consider a bankruptcy. What are the signs to look out for? Now, it's important to say up front that bankruptcy is not one size fits all. Every situation is very unique. There is no one way to determine whether bankruptcy is right for you, but there are some signs to be aware of. So I'm going to run through some of those now, just so you can do an evaluation for yourself if you're considering this yourself of whether it might be a good fit for you. So the first sign, and what many consider the most obvious sign that bankruptcy might be an option for you, is that your debt load is overwhelming. Ways this might manifest, of course, would be things like you have debts going into collections, you have letters coming in the mail about potential repossessions or foreclosures on your house. It could be that you're having wages garnished from your wages to pay for a debt. You may have particularly unsecured or credit card debt become so overwhelming that it becomes difficult to meet your basic living expenses as a result. Or you may be relying on debt to pay for your living expense, your base living expenses, right? So those would all be signs that your debt load is too high. Another way to verify that would be to conduct a financial health analysis using some financial ratios. A number of those I discussed in a video that I linked earlier, so feel free to go back and take a look at that as well if that would be helpful for you. But that's the clear and obvious sign number one, your debt load is overwhelming. And then really sign number two is that you've exhausted all other debt relief options. So while bankruptcy does give you a fresh start, there are a number of adverse consequences to it, and it really should be treated as a last resort. So you want to go through things like debt counseling. You want to investigate and explore the option of debt consolidation first. And you also want to give your creditors a call and see if they're willing to just negotiate with you, right? So I mentioned at the beginning of the video that there are really only three ways to clear debt. It's through repayment, it's through forgiveness, or it's through discharge, right? Bankruptcy is discharge. There's a reason that one's last. It's because a repayment is always the best option. If you can't do repayment, then you can explore forgiveness. That's where negotiating with creditors comes in, right? And exploring debt consolidations, other options to be able to repay at slightly different terms, right? Things like that. Only then do you, once those two are exhausted and you get down to discharge, do you really want to seriously explore bankruptcy. And one more tip, if you are seriously considering bankruptcy, is to remember that certain financial assets are protected under the law through bankruptcy. One of those is retirement accounts. So a general rule of thumb is to never sell off any retirement assets in an effort to pay off debt, because if you were to go through bankruptcy, that would be a protected asset class under the law. So now that you know what a bankruptcy is and is not, you know the difference between Chapter 13 on the one hand and Chapter 7 on the other hand, and you also now know the clear and obvious signs that a bankruptcy might be the right move for you. Now let's talk a little bit about how to start the bankruptcy process. So first thing to know is that bankruptcy is not a do-it-yourself project. If you're serious about considering bankruptcy, you should absolutely reach out to a bankruptcy attorney and discuss your specific situation with them. That said, there are some general prerequisites to keep in mind before filing for bankruptcy. The first prerequisite is that you must file proof with the courts that you have completed credit counseling with an agency approved by the U.S. Bankruptcy Trustee's Office. The purpose of this credit counseling is to give an idea of whether bankruptcy really is right for you, or if some sort of alternative or informal repayment plan could be a solution instead. This also includes attending a counseling session to learn more about the basics of personal finance. But since you're watching this channel, there's a good chance you're already well on your way to learning most, if not all, of the things in that counseling session already. Only once those two items are complete can the attorney then proceed with finally filing the petition of bankruptcy for you. Again, you should find and consult your own bankruptcy attorney before making a final decision about proceeding or not with a bankruptcy. And there you have it. I really hope that was helpful, and I hope you're coming out of this video with a much clearer idea about what bankruptcy is and whether or not it fits into your financial future. When done correctly, bankruptcy can be a fresh start, and it really can breathe some new life into your financial future, and you can harness it to really give yourself a springboard going forward. Before I let you go, I want to offer you a few things and ask a favor of you as well. First, I want to offer you my 30-day money refactor guide. It's a fantastic free downloadable PDF. It's an exercise I use for myself and my clients that really helps you gain some clarity around where your finances sit today and where you want to take them in the future. It's a step-by-step guide, totally clear and easy. You can complete it within 30 days. So if you're interested, there's a link down below in the description. Fill out a form and I'll send it right to you. Number 2 is my personal financial tracking template. I mentioned that earlier in the video, and I have a couple other videos introducing you to it. Here's one for an example. This is, again, totally free downloadable template in Google Sheets that you can use. I used it myself during my own financial turnaround, and I offer it up to clients as well. You can use it to plug in your own numbers to start tracking your own cash flow, calculating your own net worth, and using financial ratios to really start mapping a trajectory for yourself for your own financial future. So again, if you're interested, it's down below in the description. Fill out the form at the link and I'll send you a copy of that. Lastly, I also am a financial coach. I'm an accredited financial counselor. And if you're interested in some one-on-one personal attention, you just need a little bit extra hand-holding and guidance for your specific situation, I'd be happy to talk to you. There's a link down below to schedule a session with me. Go ahead and click that and get yourself on the calendar, and I'd be happy to talk to you. Lastly, the favor. This is a new channel. I've just started it recently. It's starting to grow, but it's still very small. I really hope if you got value out of this, you'll do me the favor of subscribing and liking. And in fact, going even one step further would be to leave a comment down below about a question you have about personal finance or an issue that you might be facing that you'd like to hear me talk more about. Again, I'm an accredited financial counselor. I've got some good resources and some good learnings from my experience as a coach, and I would be happy to share that with you. That's the whole goal of this channel, is to help grow in their money, really transform their life, and refactor their life so they can live life with purpose. That's what I did. I started doing in 2018, and that's what I help my clients do now. So I want this channel to be about you. I really want to help you make progress and help you take massive action. So please leave a comment below with anything you'd like to hear me talk about in the future. And with that, I'm going to let you go. I really hope this was helpful to you, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.